Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for attending today's meeting of Strategy and Resources Committee. My name is Tom Hunt. I'm the chair of this committee and leader of the council. Meeting today is open to the public. Thank you very much to members of the public who've joined us. And there's no items on today's agenda that contain any exempt information. The meeting is being webcast and the recording will be available later. We've got 6 agenda-related questions from members of the public, and they'll come at item 5 under the agenda. And we'll today be using the new scheme for public questions, which was agreed at the council's AGM earlier this year. If I could just ask everyone to switch their phones off for today's meeting. Just to confirm, there's no fire test planned, but if there is an emergency evacuation, please follow the advice from Town Hall staff. I'm going to ask every member of the committee to introduce themselves, and then the officers who are present to introduce themselves first. So, starting on my left.
Councillor Angela Argencio, member for Broomhill and Sharville and Chair of Adult Health and Social Care.
Douglas Johnson, Chair of Housing.
Zahira Naz, Chair of Finance.
David Barker, Councillor for Richmond Ward.
Good afternoon, Abdul Qayyum, Councillor for Firth Park Ward.
Fran Belbin, Councillor for Firth Park Ward and Deputy Chair of the Committee.
Jarleton, Chair of Waston Street Scene.
Andrew Sanger, Councillor for Forward Ward, here as a substitute for Councillor Shafak Mohammed.
Councillor Curtis Crossland, Councillor for Bayton Ward and Chair of Communities, Parks and Leisure.
I'm Martin Smith. I'm Councillor for Dore and Totley and also Chair of the Economic Development, Skills and Culture Committee.
Hello, my name is Diane Hurst. I'm an elected member for Richmond Ward and I'm here in my capacity as the leader of the Sheffield Community Councillors Group.
Thank you all very much. I've had apologies from Councillors Dawn Dale and Councillor David Barker is substituting for Dawn, and also from Councillor Ben Miskell, and Councillor Minesh Parek will be joining us to substitute for Ben later this afternoon. So if I could ask the officers to introduce themselves, starting on my left.
Good afternoon, I'm Claire Taylor, Chief Operating Officer.
Good afternoon, Greg Fell, Director of Public Health and Integrated Commissioning.
Good afternoon, James Henderson, Director of Policy and Democratic Engagement.
Hi, Kate Josephs, Chief Executive.
David Hollis, General Counsel.
Hello, Craig Rogerson, Democratic Services.
Philip Gregory, Director of Finance and Commercial Services.
Alexis Chappell, Strategic Director for Adult Care and Wellbeing. Kate Martin, Exec Director, City Futures.
Thank you all very much. Before we start today's meeting, I'm just going to make a short statement, and other party leaders may do as well. This is the first time that this committee has met since the violent disorder that we saw across the country and in South Yorkshire earlier this month. Let's be clear, what we saw in that week was not protest, it was far-right hate. And I utterly condemn those who tried to divide us by targeting asylum seekers, Muslims, and minority communities, and I condemn everyone who engaged in criminal acts of violence and hate on our streets and online. What we saw was racist and Islamophobic. It was an attack on what we stand for as a city. Like everyone here, I am proud that Sheffield is a welcoming city for people seeking asylum, and proud that we are a city of sanctuary. Our diversity is our greatest strength. And I'm proud of the citywide response to the violence, and I'd like to use this opportunity to say thank you. Thank you to the people of Sheffield who came together to reject racism and hate and to show that it has no place in our city. To Sheffield City Council's staff for their hard work to support communities, particularly the local area committee staff who coordinated the response in our communities. To our partners in the voluntary community, social enterprise and faith sector for their commitment and dedication to protect and reassure communities. to calm tensions, and to ensure that people did not come to harm's way. To South Yorkshire Police for their critical role to protect and to support local communities. And I know that we all send our best wishes to all of those officers who were injured in the line of duty. And to the criminal justice system for their ongoing work to take swift action against those who broke the law and who will now feel the full force of the law. While we can be proud of our response in Sheffield, we cannot be complacent. People are still fearful, and there is much to do with our partners to strengthen and develop community cohesion in our city. We will continue to celebrate our diversity and to stand firm against all forms of racism, Islamophobia, discrimination, and violence. We must work in partnership with the voluntary, community and faith sector, with the police, with health organisations and with the government to engage with communities, promote unity, bring people together and ensure that Sheffield remains a welcoming city. And I know that there is cross-party resolve to ensure that that happens. And so in that spirit, I would like to invite other group leaders to each give a short statement as well. I'll come to Councillor Crossland, who's giving the statement on behalf of Councillor Mohammed and the Lib Dem group, and then to Councillor Johnson, if you'd like.
Thank you, Chair. The country has rightly been appalled and outraged at the disrespectful actions and despicable actions by a tiny minority of people who rioted and carried out racist and Islamophobic attacks. They are facing the full force of the law, and rightly so. We do also welcome the new measures announced by the government to clamp down on criminals attempting to terrorise our communities. Everyone has the right to feel safe in their homes, neighbourhoods and places of worship. Thugs, rioters and racism will never triumph in this country, and it is, however, heartwarming to see so many people from all different backgrounds and cultures and all different walks of life coming together to bring their communities together in solidarity against racism and violence. We are indebted, of course, to our police officers who put themselves in harm's way to protect our communities and to protect our families and friends. People from all backgrounds and all walks of life have come together to condemn these riots, and they're the ones who represent our country. They are the best of Britain, and we need to say thank you to all of them.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crossland. Councillor Johnson?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation there. First, I just want to say, I agree with the others, it's important to condemn those who committed the violence and the behaviour that we saw that was, so disrespectful, so upsetting, and a cause of fear and terror across our communities for that period earlier this month. And then conversely, I wanted to actually thank all the people who stood up. This was actually a real test for people in Sheffield to stand up against those values of violence, intimidation, hurt that we saw. And people did step up to that. And I know that people who turned out to demonstrate against the anticipated far-right demonstrations and the counter-demonstrations went there knowing that with some fear in what they were going to, because a lot of us have a history of going to demonstrations. We don't normally go there thinking, well, actually there's a possibility that things could turn violent. We're used to peaceful demonstrations in this city. And of course, so it turned out to be. The so-called protests by the far right were a damp squib. The people of Sheffield prevailed, but it wasn't a pleasant experience. So thanks to everyone involved with that. There are people in this room, and there are also lots of people outside this room. I completely agree with the comments so far. Thanks to the Leader of Council saying those. I'm not going to name the different groups of people who all contributed to Sheffield making a stance there. I want to say this did not happen in a vacuum. So we had the bizarre trigger for this event, though with a completely unrelated horrific set of murders in Southport that translate into this somehow. There's no logical reason for that. this did not happen in a vacuum. So first of all, there's the policy of austerity. Austerity drives deprivation, which drives hatred, which derives intent. It's neighbour upon neighbour. And we have that. We've experienced many years of that. On those big estates across South Yorkshire, where people have been left behind, to use the current phrase, socially excluded, to use the phrase of 20 or 30 years ago, this is what we see happen. But my second point is that isn't what drove the events. What drove the violence there was people triggering that from impositions of power, responsibility and influence. I'm talking here about Christians of mainstream politicians, mainstream media. We take it for granted that people can say overtly racist stuff to wide audiences on the headlines of newspapers like the Daily Mail, and in utterances from the previous Prime Minister, and I have to say amongst politicians of the Labour Party too. We hear those utterances coming out, singling out communities who are particularly vulnerable, pointing at them, and that is disgraceful, but we now see what it results in. So we need to, as a community, as a society, and at a national level in particular, we need to see a building of social cohesion. We need to ask the question why we have a system of segregation in this country. So think about it this way. Asylum seekers who are homeless are not treated in the same way as white British people who are homeless. There is a completely different, separate and segregated system. And same way work, the ban on asylum seekers working. It increases segregation, it avoids integration. That's not a good thing for any of us in our country. And the same with social care. Access to social care in circumstances of complete destitution is not the same for people seeking asylum as it is for those who are not. So we have those entrenched things in our society, and it's a challenge for government at every level to address those. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I shall be very brief. All I want to say is Sheffielders are rightly proud that we were the first city of asylum, and we're proud of the work that we've done over the years to develop a genuinely multicultural society. But the events of the past month lead us all to be aware that you can't stop in your efforts to build a genuine, multicultural, supportive society where everyone can thrive. And I hope we direct our efforts to that going forwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I think we all echo that final point. Proud of our response, but cannot be complacent. There's much to do. And in due course, there'll be more that we say on this, but thank you all for that. So, reverting back to the agenda for today. Item number 2, exclusion of the press and public. There are no items, just to confirm, that contain any exempt information. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any members who wish to declare an interest in any of the items of business on today's agenda? Councillor Johnson.
Just one, I probably should declare a personal interest in item 9, the Gleadless Valley item, just because I'm the chair of the Gleadless Valley Members Board.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Item number 4, minutes of the previous meeting. I'll ask members to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting that this committee held on the 30th of May 2024. Happy to approve them. Thank you all very much. Item number 5 then, public petitions, questions and statements. And as I mentioned earlier on, we're now operating under a new scheme of public questions. This is the first meeting, which will be, we'll be doing things slightly differently with our public questions and petitions. We've received the following questions and statement from members of the public, 6 what are now called agenda-related questions, which relate to the business of today's agenda. We've got participants who are joining us in person, also remotely via the Teams link, we think, in a moment, possibly via the Teams link in a moment, and individuals who have asked for their statements, questions to be read out on their behalf. So we've got 30 minutes for public questions, and the order which we'll do the questions in will be Jane Edwards, followed by Maggie Young in person here in the chamber, possibly Jenny Fortune remotely if Jenny's able to log on, and then we've got Sally Pedley, Irene Wadsworth and Charlie Hill questions to be read out. So with that in mind, I will ask Jane Edwards to come up to the front and ask your question, if that's all right. That desk there would be perfect. On the, there we go, you're just being assisted to turn the microphone on. Oh, if you just, other side, there we go.
Yeah. Good afternoon, my name is Jane Edwards. I'm a Gleadless Valley ward resident, and I've followed with interest the Gleadless Valley Master Plan since 2016. I met Matthew a few minutes ago, and can I say I really enjoyed reading his report. If only it had been written over 2 years ago, and my questions related to that. So I'm surprised that a whole council approach isn't common practice for major projects such as the Gleadless Valley Master Plan. In this paper, this is one of the recommendations, along with appointing a head of project delivery and establishing a board and a delivery group. So why wasn't this done at the beginning? Why wasn't it done before? And linked to that, an estimate of 662,000 of additional funding, is also requested. How much of this is to buy in external expertise which isn't available within the authority? And has consideration been given to how the work of the Regeneration team, at an annual cost of over £740,000, how will this be assessed, whether it's effective or not? Thank you.
Jane, thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you for your questions. The existing governance and delivery arrangements were appropriate for the existing master plan. The focus of that master plan was clearly on refurbishment, remodelling and replacement of council housing using the housing revenue account funding. However, as set out in the report, as you'll have seen, construction cost inflation means that the current master plan proposals are not affordable within the council's housing revenue account. Other sources of funding will now need to be found, and that will involve working more intensively with other parts of the council and with external partners such as housing associations. The recommended changes to governance and delivery arrangements, including the proposed head of project delivery, the new Regeneration board and the delivery group, are designed to enable this new approach by bringing together senior staff, elected members from across the council, together with residents, partners and community organisations and ward colleagues as well. The additional funding is for revenue activity. Most of this activity involves paying for additional expertise, a mixture of council staff time and external support in the form of advice, data analysis, research, design, community engagement, amongst other things. The Gleadless Valley Regeneration team, which you mentioned, will provide the main resource for delivering the work of refreshing the master plan and developing a delivery plan, and their progress in doing so will be closely monitored by the Gleadless Valley Delivery Group. I hope that you'll be able to stay and listen to the main presentation and any discussion after that afterwards, and I'm very happy to have follow-up conversations with yourself and others around this.
I would appreciate follow-up conversations because I think there's been a communication vacuum. So that would be appreciated.
Part of the reason for bringing it today is to be really clear, transparent about what's happening, and we've got a commitment from myself, others here, the staff, to make sure that there is ongoing dialogue around this. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
The next question is from Maggie Young.
Hello. I'm speaking as someone who, along with Jane and with Tony, have been visiting people on the Gleadless Valley estate for a number of years now. So my question, I mean, overall, we really appreciate now it's being acknowledged that the previous plan had stalled because things have just been stuck and we haven't been getting very much information. But I've got one concern, is there's people that we visited years ago, probably as early as 2017, who'd been told their houses were going to be demolished or remodelled, who were living in poor conditions, awaiting a number of repairs. They'd been promised compensation. How are they going to be communicated with now? So that's one question. And secondary to that, what assurance can be given that residents who've waited for so long in unsatisfactory housing will not still be waiting in the same position in, say, I understand the building works won't be starting till 2026, 2027. And so I don't want people who feel let down. I don't want any risk that they could be feeling let down again in another couple of years.
Maggie, thanks very much for your questions. Thank you for coming today. On behalf of the council, I apologise for the delay and for the uncertainty that those residents whose homes were due to be demolished or remodelled have experienced. The council has established a Gleadless Valley repairs project team, which is initially targeting the backlog of repairs for those residents whose homes were due to be demolished or remodelled. This should address any immediate issues. The purpose of this proposed new approach is to get new housing built as quickly as possible. But this will involve looking at the plans again, so that we have something that is affordable and deliverable. If the refreshed proposals no longer involve demolition or remodelling of those homes, we fully intend that they will be included in the scope of refurbishment works instead. But residents who are still required to move home will be provided with home loss compensation, which is intended to cover the costs of moving home. I am genuinely sorry for the delays that residents have experienced, and I really don't underestimate how difficult and frustrating this must be. The report that I hope this committee will approve today is the first step in a new approach. I hope that this will give residents reassurance that the project will now move forward with a commitment that we will deliver and develop the refreshed master plan in the next 12 months. I do accept that we've got a lot of work to do to rebuild trust with the local community after the delays that we've experienced, but today is the first step in rebuilding that trust. Thanks, Maggie.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you.
Right. I don't think we have anyone on the line, do we?
Jenny is trying to join us, so if we perhaps do the other question, she might be able to.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. So, next question is Sally Headley, and Craig, you're going to read that question out and we will answer it.
Thank you, Chair. Question from Sally Headley. What steps have been taken to seek compensation and recover the costs paid to Turner and Townsend cost consultants in underestimating the cost of the master plan by half, regardless of the impact of COVID? 2, how was the proposed membership of the new Gleadless Valley Regeneration Board decided? Who decides the membership of the board? 3, why are Gleadless Valley Ward councillors not included on the board, as they are local stakeholders who represent Gleadless Valley tenants and residents? Why are the chairs of Strategy and Resources and the South Like, who have little or no connection to the area, included? 4, how are you deciding who an independent chair is, and why should the chair of the new Gleadless Valley Regeneration Board be independent and unconnected to the area? And finally, 5, why, after the years people have been waiting for this to start, is it now being reset with no clear communication to tenants living in properties that we were told would be demolished?
Thank you very much for reading that out, Craig, and thank you, Sally, for the questions. We'll make sure that we send a written copy to Sally so that you've got these. Craig, you you to switch your mic off? Sorry. Taking those questions then. The Turner and Townsend costs were accurate at the time, based on the information that was available then. The increase in costs is due to construction cost inflation and the identification of additional costs such as rehousing costs that Turner and Townsend were not asked to estimate. This report that we're considering today is asking the committee to agree the broad parameters of membership of the proposed new Gleadless Valley Regeneration Board. This is an important statement of the importance that the council is attaching to this work at Gleadless Valley and our intention to work in genuine partnership with residents and local community organisations. In line with the boards for other regeneration projects in the city, such as at Castlegate or Attercliffe, we will ask interested residents and organisations to put themselves forward, and the board will have flexibility to determine its own membership and bring new members in as required. I look forward to working with other members and officers to agree the details of the council's representation on the Gleadless Valley Regeneration Board. I absolutely recognise that local ward councillors are key stakeholders who have deep knowledge of Gleadless Valley and the local community. The report suggests that one councillor is represented on the board, but the board will have flexibility to adjust the membership, for example, to have more than one local councillor on the board if that is considered appropriate. Local ward councillors will also be involved directly in work streams and through regular briefings with council officers. As the chair of this committee, Strategy and Resources, I welcome the opportunity to be part of the board, sit on it, which I hope demonstrates my commitment to Gleadless Valley. As the report sets out, we'll need help from others if we're going to deliver a regeneration programme of the scale that we want in the current financial climate. I'll use the influence that I have as leader of the council to secure senior level support from partners. The Regeneration Board should be a forum to think big about the future of Gleadless Valley, to get residents and partners behind an exciting vision for the area. The chair of the board will play an important role in leading that process and getting people working together. The idea of an independent chair for the board does not appear in the committee report, but has been suggested by officers in other forums. The idea behind this is that it might be useful to have someone independent of the council chairing the board as a sign of the commitment from the council to genuinely work in partnership with others. It would be, however, for the board to decide and would be dependent on finding the right person. We would want somebody with strong personal connection and commitment to Gleadless Valley, along with board level experience in public life or in business or appropriate expertise. Recommendation 6 of the report is that residents living in blocks that are identified in the existing master plan for demolition or remodelling should be informed that the plans for their blocks are being reviewed and may change. We recognise that it's been extremely hard for those residents to plan for the future, and so it's important that we give them as much information as we can, and we will write to those residents shortly. However, it is also really important that we don't make promises that we can't keep. So I want us to be 100% sure that the revised plans are deliverable before we give residents new timescales for rehousing. Hopefully that answers Sally's questions, but we'll make sure we get answers across to Sally. The next question is from Wadsworth. Craig.
Thank you, Chair. Sheffield City Council's plan includes making great, welcoming, clean, green and healthy neighbourhoods that people are happy to call home. Many of us who live in Gleadless Valley are not happy to call our neighbourhood home or welcome people to it because of the council's failure over a long-standing period to fulfil its statutory obligations. Documented failures regarding the repair and maintenance of housing aside, very little seems to be planned to tackle ongoing issues such as weed-covered and unrepaired pathways, steps, communal entranceways and planted areas, along with shoddy mowing, unending littering, fly tipping and so on. A big positive difference to the majority of people who live in Gleadless Valley, and to help attract businesses and investors to the area, would be to properly solve these issues that make the estate look grotty, unwelcoming, uncared for and hazardous in places. My question to the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee is whether the possibility of Sheffield City Council finding funds to employ people on the ground to tackle these issues is being or will be explored, especially as the preparation of the revised Gleadless Valley master plan proposals is being undertaken?
Thanks very much, Craig, for reading that out, and thank you, Irene, for the questions. As before, we'll make sure we get written copies to you. So let me just respond by starting by saying I fully recognise that management and maintenance of the public areas around homes in Gleadless Valley makes a big difference to the overall impression of the area and to the quality of life for residents. We definitely need to tackle this as part of the regeneration. The housing refurbishment proposals will look at communal entrances, paths and spaces around homes. The green and blue spaces workstream will look at how those areas could provide better amenities for local residents, for example, through planting and play areas, including by supporting resident-led projects. But we recognise that there is no point in investing in those areas if they're not going to be well maintained. So developing a management strategy and a maintenance strategy for the estate is a key piece of work that we need to undertake alongside developing these revised proposals. In the meantime, we will of course look for ways to make visible changes quickly, for example by targeting littering hotspots, working with the police to target fly tipping and reviewing the existing mowing regimes. And that, I think, will be a conversation that we'll want to progress through the board and in the coming weeks and months. So thank you for those questions, Irene. And we'll get a copy to you. We have a question from Charlie Hill, which again, Craig, you're going to read out.
Thank you, Chair. These are a series of bullet-pointed questions as follows. What does mixed tenure mean? Private housing renting? Will landlords be local, living Gleadless Valley, Sheffield, South Yorkshire? What's the percentage of private social housing? What does affordable housing mean? How is the workstream for green and blue spaces going to engage with issues around motorbikes and pedestrians? Does it have plans to develop areas in the woods where each group can do their activities? What does natural surveillance mean? Local people are asking for more family, primary age activities, after school care, early intervention in antisocial behaviour. Are there plans for this? A playground in Gleadless, play areas in woods. On the subject of making the most of the valley's proximity to the city centre and excellent bus links, major bus routes numbers 1 and 11 are discontinued from September the 1st, connecting Healy Green, Newfield Green, Gaunt Road and Herdings. Local residents are concerned about how they will move from one end of the valley to the other. Can the team consider how this will affect local people's access to services and amenities? How will the team ensure local people are employed for the construction work by advertising work in Gleadless Valley? What are the new ways the team will develop community engagement? The community are fatigued with engagement.
Thank you very much, Craig. Thank you, Charlie, for those questions. Let me just sort of preface these answers by recognising that a lot of the work to refresh the master plan and put together the delivery plan means that, as I mentioned in my previous answer, a lot of the detail is going to be worked through. And so, you know, some of the specifics at this stage are to be worked through with colleagues. But let me just provide some answers, and again, we'll send these through. In terms of mixed tenure, we remain committed to an increase in affordable rent housing in Gleadless Valley so that local tenants can stay in the area and benefit from the regeneration. As well as new affordable rent housing, we believe there is an opportunity to provide other types of housing which will help to meet the wider housing needs of the city and help to support local shops and services. This could include other types of affordable housing, such as discounted rent or shared ownership, as well as homes for sale for rent at market prices. The exact mix will need to be determined as part of reviewing the development proposals. We don't yet know who new landlords will be, but we would expect them to be institutional landlords, such as housing associations, rather than individuals. I completely understand the issues that Charlie mentions about antisocial behaviour. In relation to the issues that are raised about the woods, We will work closely with residents and with stakeholders to develop proposals that address these issues and help to make the woods a safe and more welcoming place for everyone, including children. We would welcome Headley Development Trust's involvement in developing the plans. Plans are already being developed for new play facilities at Spotswood, which we're aiming to complete by next summer. In relation to employment and enterprise opportunities for local residents, we will ensure that construction contracts include apprenticeships and other training opportunities, and we will prioritise Gleadless Valley residents for those opportunities. The proposed employment and skills delivery plan will set out more details of how opportunities will be made available to Gleadless Valley residents. We completely recognise and share your concerns and probably frustration about changes to bus services serving Gleadless Valley. We are and will work closely with South Yorkshire's Mayor to review and seek to improve public transport to benefit residents and to support the regeneration of the area. In terms of community engagement, we recognise that the local community groups and voluntary organisations have strong roots within the local community, so the intention is very much to work closely in partnership with those groups to involve and engage local residents in the regeneration. There will be a wide range of getting involved, from responding to formal consultations through to attending events, to sitting on the workstream working groups or the Gleadless Valley Regeneration Board. We'll make sure those answers are provided to Charlie, and again, thank you for asking them today. Final question was due to be remote. It doesn't look like we have been able to connect today, so how are we doing for time? Because we have 30 minutes, don't we?
I think we've got a couple of minutes to deal with this, Chair. Yeah, Jenny's having some problems technically, so I've emailed her to say I will read it out on her behalf and we'll get a written response to her. Jenny's question is, we are very pleased to see Sheffield City Council's intention to carry out this pilot on the Gleadless Valley estate. How will the team be established and who will it be immediately accountable to regarding 1. Choice and range of typologies. 2. Standards and monitoring applied to the retrofit pilot. For example, will it be zero carbon? 3. Measurement of community engagement and skills development.
Thank you very much, Craig, and thank you to Jenny Fortune and to Rob Hunt from Gleadless Valley Materials Bank for those questions. And just to be clear, they relate to item 2.3.4 in the report, which references the deep retrofit pilot. So, Jenny, hopefully you're able to watch this back, but we'll make sure we get copies to you. Thank you very much to you and Rob for your questions and for the interest in the proposal for a deep retrofit pilot. We look forward to working with the Gleadless Valley Materials Bank alongside other partners on this element of the refurbishment and sustainability workstream. Council officers envisage identifying and appointing a project manager to lead the project as soon as possible after the committee decision. The project manager will draw together a team of interested stakeholders to define the project further and will lead discussions with potential investors and energy companies to explore potential funding models and what each model might require in terms of typologies and standards. We know from other retrofit projects nationally that good community engagement will be vital to success, so this will form a key part of the project. Day-to-day accountability for the project will be via the workstream lead, which is Dean Butterworth, the Council's Head of Council Housing Investment and Maintenance, who will report progress to the Gleadless Valley Delivery Group and to the Gleadless Valley Regeneration Board. Thank you very much to everyone who joined us today to ask questions and to people who tabled them in advance, and we'll send out those copies later on. That is the conclusion of public questions today, but we will obviously be returning to the subject of Gleadless Valley Regeneration, item 9 on the agenda, if colleagues are able to stay for that. Item 6 on today's agenda is member questions. None were received on this occasion. Item 7 is a report about retirement of council staff. And I'm sure the committee will join me in thanking the members of staff listed in the report for their long-standing service and commitment to Sheffield City Council. Are we all agreed with that? Thank you all very much. Item 8 on our agenda today is the work programme, and for that I will hand to Craig.
Thank you, Chair. Members have got an updated work programme before them. The new and amended items are set out in paragraph 4 on page 40, there for members' agreement, and there is a complete programme attached at Appendix 1. Just a couple of points to draw to members' attention. One is the item on opposing minimum service levels. That is still in the plan without a date, but it's likely no longer to be required as the government intends to repeal the Original Strikes Act as part of a new Employment's Right bill. So on the passing of that bill, that item is likely to be withdrawn. And then just to notify you that I've had an indication that the growth plan is now proposed for November rather than September. There's some internal briefing work to be done on that, and then there's going to be some stakeholder engagement over September and October.
Thank you very much, Craig. Any questions on the work programme? I see quite a few. Councillor Crossland, Councillor Smith, Councillor Otten.
Thank you, Chair. In the outstanding responses to full council motions, we have the reaffirming Sheffield as a city of sanctuary. I think considering what we discussed at the start of this meeting, it would be quite good to prioritise that and see if we can get a date for that.
I completely agree. At the pre-agenda meeting, we did discuss finding dates as soon as possible for all of those outstanding items, particularly the one you've just mentioned. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the work programme, and I'm just mindful that we're all waiting on tender hooks for the autumn statement in, I think it's the beginning of November. Whether we are scheduling an update on the implications for this council at the November meeting.
One to take away, but it feels like possibly one for Finance Committee.
I'll take your steer on that. It's just I didn't see it in the work programme.
Thank you. Councillor Otten.
Thank you, Chair. Just my regular grievance. A number of the items on the agenda today and in future meetings, I do have to ask, could they not go to the appropriate policy committee? So we have electrical testing, which is a housing issue. I appreciate there's a change within the housing revenue account. Can the housing committee not have the power to make changes within the housing revenue account within the ring fence? Smoke-free sounds like a health issue. Housing strategy, housing growth strike me possibly as housing issues. Health and well-being, possibly not a health issue. It's a source of frustration that we don't seem to, in particular, we don't seem to have a health committee capable of taking health decisions. That the health committees, the health and social care remit is slightly narrower than that, and therefore everything has to come here. I just do wonder that we give these issues better consideration if they could be taken in a more specialist committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Otten. I think it's a principle well sort of established over the last year that where there are issues that are whole council and require a whole council approach, such as the new housing strategy, which is not just about the work of the Housing Policy Committee. It touches on a wide range of broader issues, and we've brought it here already for the draft consideration of it, that there is precedent now that when it's a whole council, SNI is the appropriate part of the council to take the decision, but then in time it will be down to the relevant policy committees with specific responsibilities, lead responsibilities, to oversee the monitoring of those strategies. So always happy for things on our work programme to be challenged and scrutinised. I think we also need to recognise that there are some financial decisions that this committee needs to take because of the scale of the contracts that are awarded. But look, very happy to make sure that we're giving proper scrutiny to the work programme, and if possible, there are things that we can give to other committees. In the past, we've remitted issues to the Finance Committee, which were originally scheduled to come here. So it certainly has been done before, and happy to do it again in order to free up time on this heavily congested work programme for SNR. So we'll look at it in due course. And pleased that the government is helping us out by repealing the trade union bill, freeing up time on the SNR agenda, as well as supporting trade unions and improving employment rights. So it's win-win for everyone with that one on minimum service levels. Are there any other questions on the work programme? Okay, so with that, those comments in mind, are we all agreed to accept the work programme as is set out in the pack? Thank you all very much. Item number 9 is the Gleadless Valley Regeneration and Delivery Plan. And we've been joined by a number of officers to present. Perhaps to begin, I'll ask you to just briefly introduce yourselves and then to briefly introduce the report. So perhaps starting on the left of the table, my right.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Dean Butterworth. I'm the Council Housing Head of Investment and Maintenance.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Kate Martin, Exec Director for City Futures.
Hello, I'm Matthew Noel. I'm an interim advisor on housing growth for City Futures.
Well, thank you very much. So I'll hand over to you to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll introduce the report. As I said, the committee is asked to support a new approach to the regeneration of the Gleadless Valley estate. The original Gleadless Valley Master Plan was approved by the Council in September 22, but the increases in the cost of construction means that the plans are no longer viable and deliverable within the budget allocated to the project. We recognise there's considerable frustration among residents, and we apologise for the resulting delays in delivery. The report sets out a process for getting the project back on track by reviewing and revising the plans and working with the local community and partners such as developers and investors to bring in additional expertise, capacity and funding. This approach will also provide an opportunity to ensure that improvements to housing and public spaces are complemented by social and economic interventions to address high levels of deprivation in the area and build thriving communities. So approval is sought to use £662,000 of existing capital budget in the current financial year to review and update the master plan proposals and develop a delivery plan in partnership with the local community and delivery partners and investors. Also, a new delivery and governance structure is proposed within the report, including a Gleadless Valley Regeneration Board that will bring together residents and community groups with senior council leaders and delivery partners to drive the process and oversee the overall strategy. Approvals will continue to be sought by the relevant council committees as appropriate, and members will be regularly updated on the progress of this work. Matthew, unless you've got something else to add, I'm quite happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Dean. So I'll open it up to questions, comments, feedback from members of the committee. Councillor Otten.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for bringing this. I think we're all terribly frustrated at how the Gleadless Valley Master Plan has gone or has not gone so far, and I think I share the sense of frustration. We all heard the questions at the beginning, and to summarise some of the lines of the questioning is how come we couldn't have done some of this 5 years ago, and I agree with that. I want to echo particularly Maggie Young's question. She spoke of people who were told in 2017 that their home was going to be knocked down. I can confirm, there's a friend of mine in the same boat. He keeps asking me, he's been asking me for the last 4 years, when are they going to knock my house down? And he doesn't particularly mind, he just wants to know. People need to plan their lives, don't they? And I still can't tell him reading this. So I suppose the first question is, and there's a danger, isn't there? I mean, look, the partnership is welcome, the board is welcome, the project manager these are all necessary things we should have had long ago. The danger and the question in my mind is how much more talking now before we start the doing, because there doesn't seem to be an answer in here. And one thing that fills me a little bit of nervousness is that the ambition to say, look, we're not going to reduce the scope, we're going to bring in partners, is a good ambition, but Tom's answer to one of the questions actually led me to think that actually the scope isn't clear. We don't know whether we can bring in partners with funding. We don't know, therefore, we're going to have to reduce the scope. If we don't even know that, then again, how long is it going to be before we start the doing?
Are there any other members who would like to come in on this item? In which case, no. Oh, sorry, yeah. Well, let's take a round. Do you want to come in? Is it a follow-up? Councillor Crossland?
Mine was on a slightly different issue.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Colleagues, do you want to pick up Councillor Otten's point?
Yes, thank you. There's no doubt that it's a very frustrating position for those residents, and we very much recognise that. I think there's no, we can't sort of immediately say, there's no immediate answer. We're going to have to take time to get this right and to look again at the plans. So there isn't a simple answer for those people. What we've set out in the paper is two things really. One, that we will write to those people immediately to explain the decision that's been made today and to explain there will be a further period and that the plans are quite likely to change. So we don't know whether their properties are definitely going to be demolished or remodelled at all, and it will take us some time to confirm that. That, I'm afraid, is just inevitable. There's no point in us giving people, a message that we aren't 100% sure of ourselves. So I feel like that's the right thing to do. At the same time, we really recognise that we need to, as quickly as possible, try to get some certainty, particularly for those residents. And so, if you look at the section 2.8 in the report that talks about, and 2.9 that talks about continuing activity on the ground while the plans are being reviewed, we do talk about looking at early initiatives that could be delivered. Some things are being delivered already, but that could include us looking, and we will look quickly at whether there are some elements of the existing master plan that could be delivered while we review the other parts of the master plan. And that could happen quite quickly. And if that happened, we would then have more information for some of those residents.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Just to supplement Matthew's answer to the question, as you can see in this report, we've given a clear commitment to communities and the City of Sheffield that we will develop a clear delivery plan. As part of that plan, we would expect commitments around finance, investment, partnerships that need to come forward to be part of that fully costed delivery plan, which will be reviewed over time as well, as part of that plan, to make sure that we can deliver the programme of work that we're setting out and moving forward now, acknowledging some of the delays that have happened already. And that's a material change in the approach.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that we are going to be delivering from October is a full stock condition survey of the whole of Gleadless Valley. So we'll be asking residents to let us into their properties so we understand the full condition of the whole estate on Gleadless Valley, so that when we're working out the future investment requirements, we understand where that investment is required. So when we will be proposing some challenging options for decision around potential demolition and reprovision, it will be based on stock condition and stock option appraisal data, which is very clear in relation to where the investment needs to be spent.
Thank you. And I think that I said earlier on that we are sorry for the delay to residents, and as colleagues have set out, there will be a further delay. But what they've got is a commitment from us to work with them on a new delivery plan and to refresh this, and a commitment to engage with them to make sure that there's clear information about what is happening, and that's something that I think we can all stand behind. That delivery plan, as set out in recommendation 4, should be delivered over the coming year. Councillor Smith, do you want to ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for answers. I just wondered even the time to answer that original question. Let's be honest, the report doesn't make very good reading at all. I think, with the greatest respect, when you say residents are frustrated, I think, judging by the questions we've had, I think it goes beyond frustration. The council has let them down big time. But I welcome the attempts to rectify the situation. But forgive an old project manager that used to manage large capital projects, but there's something I don't understand about the numbers, and it refers back to the public question we had from Sally Pedley, where you read out the answer, Chair, when it was said that the cost estimates at the time were correct, and yet here we are, 3-4 years later, and the costs have doubled. They've gone up 100%. And I know that construction costs have gone up, but if you look at the ONS data, that would account for about 30%. So there's still a 70% cost increase that doesn't seem to be accounted for or doesn't seem to be explained. Now, correction, just to correct myself, there is, I think on page 68, an admission that there was 20 million pounds of costs were completely missed out, but that still leaves 50 million quid that's unexplained and unaccounted for in this report. So that doesn't, with the greatest respect, tally with the fact that, well, the numbers were all right in the first place. Something's not quite right. So can somebody help this poor old project manager understand where that 50 million quid's gone? Thank you.
Thank you. So the table I think you're referring to is in paragraph 7.1.1. Page 68, yeah, thank you. I just want to confirm that the right-hand column in that table, which adds up to the 195 million, includes inflation to date and future inflation. So that is a calculation of the cost of delivering the programme over the, I think, whatever it is, 11 years that it was originally forecast to be. So the impact that you're talking about is a mixture of the. I mean, I don't know, but, I haven't looked at the figures in terms of how much of it is to date and how much is in the future. But if 30% is the correct figure, then 30% would be what's happened to date, and then there's a sort of an impact into the future by the time that we actually would get on site with any of these projects.
So did the Turner and Townsend cost estimate include a provision for 11 years cost inflation?
No, but they weren't asked to do so.
No, that's right. Councillor Smith, no, it didn't include that. Therefore, the forecast that we've got now takes into account the inflation, national conditions, the construction market as it is at the moment, and some forward look as well as part of that.
So can I just, with it?
One more follow-up.
Yeah, so can I just double check what I've just heard? That when we say that the original cost estimates were correct, they didn't include any provision for potential inflation over the subsequent 11 years, and it was just a snapshot in time? I think that's what I've just heard. Could you clarify that, please?
I think what we can say is that it didn't include provision that would forecast the market changes that we've experienced, including a pandemic, etc., and cost inflation back in 2019 and there beyond. But broadly, the forward look that information provided was set at a period in time and hadn't been sort of revisited in a way that you would expect for a multi-million pound regeneration programme of this size and scale.
Councillor Cosson.
Wow, okay. Thank you, Chair. I think generally speaking, throughout the report, it's said a few times that this is we've run out of money and so the project has stalled. However, if we still fully believed in the project, you'd be here asking us to find more resource to get the project done. What you're coming here asking us to do is to rearrange it and put in new management structures. So it isn't necessarily a failure of funding, it's a failure of management. And so you will only hear me say this once, Councillor Hunt, but I feel a little bit sorry for you actually coming into this now, because this has been going on for years. So where's the leadership been throughout those years? I don't think there's been a single member's question on it in the last 2 years at full council. I don't see where the political leadership has been. So I would ask that members kind of take that on board, because as local members, we need to push these big projects forward as well, politically. But more directly, I do actually have a question as well. There's two things that worry me in this. There is a bit about how we want to work with partners to build properties, so potentially housing associations and other partners. That could lead to a loss of revenue for the HRA, is my understanding. Do we know what that number is yet? And when, if we do know in the future, will that come back to us? Because I think we members need to see that before anything is properly approved. And then secondly, there was a section about tenants who feel that their repairs, housing repairs, haven't been prioritised. Is that actually the case that Gleadless Valley, that a decision was taken for residents in Gleadless Valley to be deprioritised for housing repairs? And if so, when was that decision made?
We've got Councillor Hurst and Councillor Johnson. I'm going to take this question. But on the political leadership point, it's coming to this committee with a refresh of the master plan because there is a political recognition that this project hasn't made the progress that it should have, and things have, if you carry on doing the same thing, nothing's going to change. So we have to make some changes. This is what this is about. This is why it's coming to SNR, to make sure that it's got the whole council approach and that there is a clear commitment from the top of this council to the people of Gleadless Valley to regenerate the estate in the way that we want to do so for them, to improve their lives, to improve that community, and to make sure that we deliver on the promises that have been made. That's why it's coming here. So you can be assured, and people listening to this can be assured, that there will be close leadership and political attention paid to this. That's why I'm going to be involved in the Regeneration Board to make sure that this stays on track and that we do everything we can to do this in the best possible way that the people of Gleadless Valley deserve. We'll take Councillor Hurst and Councillor Johnson's questions and then come back to the officers to deal with those. Councillor Hurst.
Thank you. My question is around the development, the timescale for developing a detailed delivery plan, because I think we've got a high-level strategic direction here that we're being asked to approve, but we have to recognise that all the questions that have come from the community have been from people living on the estate that have been living with the lack of investment and the resultant antisocial behaviour and increased decrepitation of the estate. And we owe it to them to give them a clear position as soon as possible. It's been acknowledged today that we don't have any clear idea of the actual stock condition, and we're going to have to start looking at that. Although inflation is now taken into account in the project costs. But there will be other things that will trip us up in this regeneration project. It's a major project. There'll be, you're doing do-it-yourself at home or a project at home. You start out with a cost envelope and you think, whoops, never took that into account, or I didn't expect that to be as bad as that or as expensive as that. With Gleadless Valley, you can multiply that by 10. And I think we really need to, when we're writing, when we're communicating with the residents on Gleadless, we need to be able to say to them, we need to apologise to them for our incompetence in the past, given, okay, there might have been a global pandemic, but we still haven't been talking to them, it doesn't sound like. And we need to talk to them, and we need to tell them what we're intending to do and when we're intending to do it by. Because they're having to live with the consequences, and those are only going to get worse. So, when are we going to be able to tell people what's going to be happening?
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, yes. Certain amount of we are where we are, really, isn't there, at the moment? I mean, that's the reality. I've got some comments later, but question is about the... I've got a question for Dean about stock condition surveys. I'll just comment on, I mean, there is a point about the fact that it turns out to cost a lot more than anyone thought it was going to cost. It's kind of been thrust of most of Keir Starmer's speeches nowadays, isn't it? At national government level, so it's worth bearing that in mind. This always happens. Question about stock condition surveys. Dean, I wonder if you can just tell the committee about the interesting thing you said about stock condition surveys there, about whether this is a change of approach by the council across the board, or just Gleadless Valley, in looking at individual individual surveys, and what sort of opportunities that might give us as a council.
Right, thank you. I think this is a decision that's been through Housing Policy Committee, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I know the answer to that, but I think it'll be helpful for the committee if Dean actually tells us, because it's quite useful, really.
Okay, just want to be clear. Colleagues.
Thanks. I think to address Councillor Hurst's question first, because I think it's a really important one about residents, tenants, leaseholders, and you know, the broader city as well, about how we approach this. Your point you make around starting a conversation, continuing to talk, working through the plans, making sure we've got early opportunities for delivery across the estate whilst the longer term delivery plan comes forward is absolutely key. And I hope those that have looked at the papers, or we will be communicating this new approach to, take time to look at the new work streams that we've set out in this report, bringing together a whole approach to this partnership to bring forward opportunities across place shaping, but also working with people around jobs, skills, business engagement, culture, the public space, green space, and other opportunities as well. And I think really having that conversation, and you can see it throughout the governance that we've set out, the new work streams that we've set out, the level of resourcing we are bringing together as a collective leadership team to support and move forward this programme. I think the talking and the continued communication, and certainly I will take that back to the internal working groups that we've got on this to make sure that that's placed at the heart of what we're planning to do as well.
Yeah. I'd like to respond to Councillor Crosland's question in relation to the HRA business planning. The Exec Director of Neighbourhood Services has commissioned Savills to do and undertake a review of the HRA business plan. And part of that is looking at the impact of potential reduced income on our 40-year expenditure. So if we've got less income coming in, we've got less money to spend on future stock and future stock improvements. So that piece of work is going to be undertaken, and that will be reported back to the Housing Policy Committee at some point in the future. In relation to Councillor Johnson's question as far as stock condition survey, it's a regulatory requirement for us to have an asset management strategy in place, and we will be presenting to Housing Policy Committee the first iteration of our asset management strategy this year. The regulation has changed over a number of years for stock condition surveys, where in the past we could use clone data. So clone data, if we had a block of 20 properties, we could go and survey one property and then make an assumption that the rest of the properties perform exactly the same way. We know that is not the case. Each individual property performs differently depending on the household size and different issues within that. So working within the new consumer standards within the regulatory framework, we're now putting a process in place, and again, Housing Policy Committee have approved £4.5 million worth of revenue expenditure to make sure we get to a point whereby we're as close to 100% stock condition data as we are. That stock condition data will not only just influence the Gleadless Valley Master Plan, it will also influence the asset management strategy across all of the HRA funded activities, so that we can start to bring to Housing Policy Committee some decisions around where we spend the monies that we've got. Because it's very clear, and we just need to get this out now, that we haven't got enough money to do everything that we need to do with our stock. Therefore, we're going to have to make some very tough decisions, but that will be made on stock option appraisals and stock condition data.
Okay, thank you very much for those responses to the questions. Thank you to everyone who asked them today. We are in a situation now where we've got a full diagnosis of what we know we need to do in order to get this on track. There's a set of work streams as Kate Martin set out that will now proceed. We've got a delivery group and a regeneration board proposals in the decision before us today that will they are a signal of our commitment to work over the next year to refresh that delivery plan and to make sure that we deliver for the people of Gleadless Valley. There are a number of recommendations before us today.
Sorry, a couple of comments I want to make first, if I can. Yeah, I'll try and keep it brief. There's no point going over history. It's been a bit of a lumbering beast through several years of coming to the master plan, but as if we are where we are. I just wanted to reflect briefly on the cross-party Gleadless Valley Members Board, which has had quite a number of constructive, sometimes constructive, sometimes frustrating meetings, but been making progress there. So I want to thank people on that and the office involved with it. But just say, the consequence of that is that, actually broadly really welcome the fact that there's been taking stock of where we are with this, welcome the report that's coming forward, because the difficulty in the last couple of years has been the focus on the need for delivery. So the master plan simply didn't have a delivery plan attached to it. There's recognition that that's what's needed there. I'm just going to flag up that there's been a lot of discussions about the right sort of representation on that proposed board, which isn't for final decision today, as you've agreed. There's recognition that because this is a residential area, it's entirely in one ward. It's appropriate that all the ward members are on there. I think my understanding is that the proposal of the LAC chair in there isn't necessarily supported, not least by the person who's the LAC chair there, which is fair enough on him. It's not applied to all regeneration boards across the city. I think it's unclear yet as to how that board will be comprised and how people are going to get involved if they're resident in the valley and want to be involved with that. I don't know if we're going to have a selection process. I guess all that detail has got to be worked out. So someone tell me if that's not the case, but I think we have to proceed on the basis that there's a lot of unknowns still. On that basis, I'm happy to proceed, and I think we've got the backing of all the members of the members board that's been looking into this quite a lot. We really want to look forward to delivery. And ultimately it's for the residents. And just final point is that there has to be that focus on the provision of at least an equal number of social rented properties. There is a fear that there's going to be lots of private developers coming in, taking over the land, building expensive executive houses and things, and all members of all parties here have been quite clear that's not what we want to see. We want an absolute commitment to having at least the same number of properties for social rent, and those be provided before anyone's asked to move out. And that's why I gave an answer to a question recently at council saying we're not anticipating that people are going to be asked to move out of their properties in the very near future, because we do all want to see new properties built and available before anyone's asked to move. We've seen this go badly wrong with regeneration schemes done by this council in the past, where communities have been displaced and the ill effects on a lot of people who live there, who perhaps didn't value their neighbours quite as much as they should have done until they lost them. So on that note, I'll pause there and say happy to support this, support the recommendations in this report.
Thanks. As colleagues have said earlier on, pending the committee's decision, there will be an immediate communication with people in those homes about setting out the exact situation and the decision that this committee's taken. Just to recap on your point around the board, in my answer to Sally Pedley's questions earlier on, I will make sure you are sent a copy of this. We will ask interested residents and organisations to put themselves forward, and the board will have flexibility to determine its own membership and bring new members in as required. So I think that answers your concerns. Look, I don't want the phrase we are where we are to sort of be interpreted as somehow like stuff's happened and now we just need to move on. We absolutely are in this place now, and we're taking decisions as a council to put to get this on track and to put in place the right vehicles to deliver on the regeneration of Gleadless Valley, to do so in a deeply serious way and with the commitment of this committee. So we just turn back to the recommendations then. There are many recommendations. There are 7 recommendations which, in the interest of time, I'm not going to read out, but they're on page 51 of the report, and they come as a package of recommendations. Can I ask, are we all agreed with those recommendations? Agreed? Yeah, all agreed? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for colleagues who joined us today. So the work now begins. Item number 10 is the Budget Monitoring Quarter 1 24-25 report. And we're joined by Philip Gregory. Philip, for the benefit of people in the room and watching at home, perhaps you can just introduce yourself and then briefly introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Philip Gregory. I'm the Director of Finance and Commercial Services. I'm the Council's Section 151 or Chief Financial Officer. So this report serves two purposes. The first is aligned to your cross-cutting responsibility for the budget framework across the Council, and the second is in relation to the service areas under the remit of this committee, and those are set out in section 2.15 of the paper, which is on page 106. It's worth noting that the changes in remits to this committee and the Finance and Performance Committee mean that some of the functions and budgets have moved from this committee to the Finance and Performance Committee, and they will be reported there from now on. In terms of the wider budget position, the context of our financial position is one of significant funding reductions across local government since 2010. Core cities haven't been isolated from these funding reductions, and Sheffield has 28% less funding, or £858 per resident less funding as a result, which we've reported here as part of the MTFS update earlier this year. The demand for many of our services, particularly those that support our most vulnerable citizens, has continued to increase following COVID and the cost of living crisis. Along with the rest of the country, the Council has been impacted by the effects of increased inflation, and we've seen the cost of delivering many services rise by more than inflation. So this triple whammy of reduced funding, increased demand and increased costs result in the financial position reported to this committee in the Quarter 1 report, which is an overspend of £34.3 million. This is a serious position for the Council to be in, and officers are working hard to find ways to reduce costs or provide services in different ways to reduce this overspend. So, are we at risk of issuing a Section 114 notice or seeking exceptional financial support from government? No. We have the reserves available that have been set aside for exactly this scenario, which is the Budget Contingency Reserve. We also set aside a housing benefit subsidy provision to cover the forecast costs there. This means that we can manage the financial position this year. However, if the forecast overspend continues throughout the year, and this is where we end the year, and we use this amount of reserves, it will leave little room for manoeuvre in future years should an overspend arise. It's critical that every opportunity to reduce the overspend is taken, and the finance team are working hard with services to find opportunities to reduce the overspend. Another round of workshops with services will take place in the next few weeks to keep the pace of progress moving. This year's financial position underlines the importance of the work of the Future Sheffield programme. The improvements to our digital services and our customer experience will be the first parts of this programme to deliver. The programme will continue to identify ways for the Council to deliver the right services in the best possible way, contributing to the economic growth of the city, achieving our city goals, and delivering against the Council plan priorities. The main drivers for the overspend this year are similar to the pressures faced over the past few years. These include persistent demand and cost pressures in adults and children's social care, growing needs in special educational needs and home-to-school transport, and an unprecedented surge in homelessness, leading to increased housing benefits subsidy losses. Work is taking place in all of these areas to address the forecast overspends and identify mitigating actions. What we are not seeing is a persistent failure to deliver savings that have been agreed. The current forecast estimates that of the £48 million of savings included in budgets, £40 million will be delivered. That's a delivery rate of over 95%, which is an improvement on previous years. These savings amounts do include additional grant income. Even if you strip out that grant income, the delivery rate is almost 90%. So council officers are clear that this is not a comfortable financial position. However, action is being taken to reduce the forecast overspend this year and, through Future Sheffield, to put the council into the right size and shape to be financially sustainable into the future. At the Finance and Performance Committee meeting on the 19th of August, members of the Council's strategic leadership team were present to answer questions from committee members on the financial position and mitigating actions being taken to address the overspend. There was a wide-ranging set of questions that covered many aspects of the Council's operations, which will be reflected in the minutes of that meeting once they're published. I'm happy to take any questions that the members of this committee have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Philip, for that and for the report. Opening up to questions. I know, Councillor Naz, you indicated you want to come in. Can I see if anyone else wants to ask any questions at this stage? Councillor Hurst, but Councillor Naz first.
Thank you, Philip. I'd just like to extend my sincere thanks to you and the whole of the finance team for the tremendous effort you are all putting in during these challenging times. Sheffield Council is currently facing significant financial challenges due to increased service demands, rising costs and reduced funding. This has resulted at a projected overspend of 34.3 million. The forecast overspend is spread across several key services areas, and this is why last week was really important that directors of services were able to answer questions that colleagues had on the Finance Committee. That conversation is ongoing, and service directors will be coming to the Finance Committee to answer further questions. I think together we will explore every possible avenue to reduce the overspend and ensure that we can set a balanced budget which will enable us to fund each committee so they can provide Sheffielders with the highest quality service. There's lots of work going on behind the scenes, and that work will continue. And, you know, we have to continue working cross-party to ensure that we can mitigate some of these challenges that we've got ahead of us. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Naz. Let me take some other questions and I'll come back to you, Philip. So I've got Councillor Hurst, Councillor Smith, Councillor Agencio in that order. Councillor Hurst.
Thank you. Thank you, Philip, for your presentation. It seems that we've been hearing reports of the same areas of pressure, the same spiralling costs, the same lack of resources to deliver the services that we need to deliver to the community for a while, shall I say. But the message is now increasingly urgent. I'm glad to hear that that reports, that delivery plans and the Finance Committee have had a chance to question the exec directors on that. And I think for me it's a question of, will that be an ongoing process? Because we know that during last year immense efforts were made to actually deliver on some of the budget savings that have been promised. But I think we need to question, we need to keep that as an ongoing iterative process. As the situation develops, the Finance Committee needs to be able to have those ongoing conversations and to raise any concerns here, because if we're talking about implications for the delivery of services for the people of the whole of Sheffield, we need to be able to have that conversation as an ongoing one. We struggled to get that response, and we've got it now, and we're taking this seriously. And I can see that here, I mean, and I know we were having conversations last year about the need to report back to members and have that conversation. Will that be an ongoing process?
Thank you very much, Councillor Hurst, and I can see Councillor Naz nodding during that, so we'll come back, give you an opportunity to respond in a minute. But let me take Councillor Smith and then Councillor Agencio.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chair. I just want to agree with Diane there. We haven't got a lot of time. Is the short version. Thank you for a very clear and concise report. As I said earlier on, we're hoping for a more generous settlement, or an indication of a more generous settlement coming out of the autumn statement. I'm just wondering, might not happen though, or it might not happen to the extent we want. Could you say anything about, are we carrying out any contingency planning or anything like that if the statement is a little disappointing. So can you just give us a bit of reassurance, hopefully, on that point? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Argentio.
Thank you. Thanks, Philip, and the team. I just want to echo something you said there. I think we've, being the chair of the Adult Health and Social Care Policy Committee, which is one of the areas that is most affected by the increase in need. I just want to just repeat something you said, maybe with different words, is that I don't think we've ever been as good at delivering on the budget proposals as we are at the moment. So I want to thank the officers for, delivering on what is in the budget. The overspend, it's clear from what you said, is due to increased need and pressures that are increasing year on year. And I think whilst, we wait for that settlement, I think this assumes that we're not going to get a larger settlement, and that's why. So we've been very kind of cautious about what we're expecting in terms of settlement. But I think also as an authority, together with the other authorities across the country now, is the time to put pressure on the government to say that we cannot carry on like this, because this is not just Sheffield, this is the whole country is in this situation with the same pressures in the same areas. So I think we need to really kind of jointly maybe with other core city, put pressure on the government in asking for a better kind of settlement for local authorities for the long term, because we cannot do it year on year.
Thank you. Let me just make a quick point just to say that those conversations are taking place. This authority, politicians, senior officers, and every opportunity they can with central government is raising their voice about to make sure that there's an awareness about the severe pressures that we face and many other local authorities face. We're raising our voice through cross-sector organisations like Core Cities, which we're playing an active role in, and also through the Local Government Association, and I'm sure that those conversations will continue. There has been a commitment for a multi-year funding settlement. The Chancellor made reference to this in the speech earlier before the parliamentary recess. But as the questioners have alluded to, there is a difficult budget that will be coming at the end of October, followed by the conclusion of a spending review in the spring. So we will see what comes from government, but just be assured that our voices are being raised about to make sure that there's an awareness about the acute pressures we face. Councillor Naz, just want to come back to you just to directly pick up on Councillor Hurst's question, and then I'll come back to yourself, Philip.
Councillor Hurst, so absolutely, the conversation will continue. We spoke to exec directors at the last finance committee, and they all said they were happy to come back and have that conversation. The finance committee have made it very clear that we need open, clear, honest, transparent dialogue between finance members and exec directors, and that conversation will continue. It has to. It's really important.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions and for the comments and the support. Councillor Hurst, I think it's important the changes that have happened to Finance Committee for it to become the Finance and Performance Committee. I think that's a really important change. We will see the first Q1 performance framework in September at Finance and Performance Committee. After that, we'll see the finance and the performance reports come together. That will allow us to draw those two things together. We'll be able to see the impacts of performance and the financial impact together. And I think pulling those two things together will be a really important, powerful way of being able to comment on how we're performing as a council and the financial implications of the performance, whether it's off track or on track, and really delve into that in more detail. The Performance and Delivery Board, which is an officer board, is also refocusing itself around the performance framework and making sure that where performance is off track, focused attention is provided on those particular services where performance is off track, so that action is taken to bring it back on track. And again, focused around many of these issues that have been raised in this paper. There's a meeting next week which will be focused around housing, for example, and the key people will be in the room to make decisions and agree an action plan to continue the work there. Councillor Smith, I agree the settlement is important. The MTFS that was presented here in July had a sort of sensitivity analysis, so we already take a view on sort of an optimistic view and a more pessimistic view and a central view, which is what we include in the MTFS. Part of that will assess the grants that come through and the funding from government. The previous government indicated that non-protected departments would be expected to shoulder a funding reduction. It wasn't clear, though, how the local government department would manage that. So the Department for Levelling Up Housing Communities, as it was then, were not clear on how much of that would be passed through to councils, nor was it clear how much the council tax referendum would be, for example. So there are other things in play around the settlement. We'll see how the new government deal with that, hopefully in the budget in October. We expect that to be a one-year settlement, and then a multiple-year settlement at the spending review in the spring is our latest expectation. We're also doing a piece of work to look at grant funding, which is due to end this financial year, what the risks are there, and where our expectations are in terms of that grant funding continuing into 25-26. So we are looking closely at those grants that are due to finish, and also the elements of the MTFS where funding is potentially at risk. And Councillor Argenzio, so that increased demand in adult social care is particularly acute. I think the other thing to flag is also that the NHS is under financial pressure. We are working hard with our NHS colleagues to make sure that we don't push costs to the NHS, and likewise they don't push costs to us in the aim of saving ourselves financially. We don't want to put them under pressure and they don't want to put us under pressure. We don't want to take any steps that have unintended consequences on either side. So we're working closely with NHS colleagues to make sure we understand who's responsible for funding what activity and making sure that we are funding that in the right way, so that we provide the people of Sheffield with the right level of care and support that they can expect and deserve.
Thank you, Philip. And just to pick up on one point you mentioned there, the bringing together of finance and performance, I think, is a really welcome development. And it's good to hear that those reports are now coming together into a single report, so there's a clear framework for the committee to engage with. And just to pick up one of Councillor Otton's earlier point, you remember, Joe, that the performance framework was due to come here. We took a decision that actually, no, this was best that it would be the responsibility of finance, and the remit would be altered to a decision taken to make it finance and performance. So the appropriate committee taking the appropriate decisions and monitoring in due course. I think, Chief Executive, you just wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make the point and acknowledge a number of things that have been said, to acknowledge the seriousness of the position we're in, to pass on my thanks, as we discussed at Finance Committee, to the Finance team, and also to make the point that actually the attendance of Senior Executive Directors at Finance Committee was not just about making sure we could appropriately answer detailed questions. It was partly intended to demonstrate that we know and understand that as a team, the way that we'll manage through this is all of us taking responsibility for delivery of those budget savings. As Councillor Argenzio said, we are seeing and demonstrating across the council that services are delivering against BIPs at a rate that has not been seen. And I think it's just really important to recognise that as part of our one council approach, delivering against our budget challenges isn't just a finance job. We're very grateful to have such an outstanding finance team. It's also about every single member of every single team taking responsibility for performance and budget, and I'm very grateful to all colleagues who are working through this. The impact of this on those delivering critical services is really hard, but we know we can get through it, and we're grateful for the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. I echo those thanks to all involved. Councillor Austin, final point on this.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for letting me come in at the end here. If you'll indulge me, I have a question for you. I remember when I was first elected here in 2011, I would come to full council, and every month the late Harry Harper would make basically the same speech, which said, in very simple terms, that the parlous state of local government finances was simply a choice of the central government, that if you were a member of the party that was in central government, you should be hanging your heads in shame that this could all be solved with a stroke of the pen, that you clearly don't care. And you know, obviously I was on the receiving end of that. It was obviously a difficult financial position the government was in. There was the deficit was 10% of GDP, or 25% of public spending, which is an even more difficult position than we're in today. So, I mean, can I ask you, Tom, was Harry wrong then, or is he right now?
Thanks, Joe. The way in which austerity was meted out on the country, into local government in particular, which suffered the deepest cuts of any spending department in Whitehall at the time, was a wholly political choice. And the new government has made it clear that that's not the approach they're going to be taken. So when it comes to do I think that the coalition government of Tories and Lib Dems between 2010 and 2015 made a series of wrong choices, of which we are still living with the consequences today, yes, I absolutely do think that Harry was right to draw attention to those political choices, and we had a stark contrast and a reminder of that this week when Keir Starmer stood up in the Rose Garden in Downing Street to be straight with the country that there is a very difficult budget coming because of the financial inheritance, and it is a reminder of the jokey press conference and speech that Nick Clegg and David Cameron gave in the Rose Garden of Downing Street back in 2010, when they were gleefully talking about the coalition and the changes that were coming to public spending. So I don't think that it's something that we want to be going back over. I want to be looking forward, not back. But do I think the coalition government got it wrong? Yes, I absolutely do. Okay, thank you very much. We have some recommendations ahead of us. That we're recommended to note the updated information in the revenue budget outturn as described in the report, including the detailed committee budget monitoring information and management actions provided. Are we happy to approve that recommendation? Thank you very much indeed. Item number 11, smoke-free generation. We're joined by Sarah and Greg. And perhaps if you could just briefly introduce yourselves and then introduce the report for us.
Thanks, Chair. So, Greg Feld, Director of Public Health Integrated Commissioning.
Sarah Hett with Health Improvement Principal and Sheffield Tobacco Control Lead.
10 seconds from me. Smoking is the new smoking. Let's make that clear. It matters an awful lot to our health inequalities. We're doing quite well. We want to accelerate that. So the proposal is to seek authorisation to spend the local stop smoking services and tobacco control intervention support grant. That trips off the tongue. Not insubstantial sum of money, £650,000, but there are complexities in how we want to spend it, hence the paper to this committee. Sarah.
Thank you, Greg. So this money's been allocated to the local authority in response to the independent CARM review and follows the previous Conservative government's ambition to make England smoke-free by 2030. And it was down to the publication of the Stop in the Start paper. The vision for us in Sheffield is that we want to have a city where children grow up where smoking doesn't exist, where it's unusual. We want a smoke-free generation in line with the government ambition. This proposal strengthens that ambition and adds to that ambition by contributing to the achievement of our tobacco control strategy, which is a 5-year strategy from 22 to 27. We've got a good track record, as Greg just said. We've reduced smoking prevalence by 30% in the last 7 years, which is no mean feat, 20,000 fewer smokers. And in order to get to that 5% smoking prevalence, sorry, 0, but 5% is the level that we say we've got there, we're proposing to spend this grant money on staff and resource, financial incentives for high prevalence smoking groups, on a South Yorkshire Tobacco Control Alliance partnership, increasing capacity within the stop smoking service, paying for quits, and on a regional mass media Yorkshire and Humber campaign. This decision matters because we've got 54,000 smokers that continue to smoke in Sheffield, many that will have started during childhood. 5,000 people admitted to hospital every year, and around 660 people that die from smoking. So we can often think that smoking is done. If I was to tell you that that's the equivalent to 2.5 primary schools or a Boeing 747 blowing up each year in Sheffield, and I don't say that, it's stark and the job is not done. In terms of that, the recommendations today
are for the committee to approve the £65,000 to go to the ICB in Humber and North Yorkshire to approve our contribution to a Yorkshire and Humber smoke-free campaign so that we can do TV and radio. And with that, we'll have a wider reach. We know that communications are significantly effective in reaching smokers at a population level and eliciting behaviour change. We have a good track record in delivering campaigns both in Sheffield and Yorkshire and Humber region, and they're detailed in the report. We'll also enhance this with local social media through Smoke Free Sheffield, and this will ensure maximum reach of our smokers. I've also noted in the report, as I've just said, the various other aspects that we want to spend some of this grant money on to accelerate the decline in smoking across the area. In order to successfully reduce smoking prevalence, both at Sheffield, at sub-region and in Yorkshire and Humber, we have to deliver action at each of those levels. Other areas that have done this across the country have seen faster declines in smoking prevalence, and we want to emulate that. So the committee is also asked to note the Council's intention to become a key partner of the South Yorkshire Tobacco Control Alliance. Entering into this partnership will allow us to work with our colleagues across South Yorkshire, local authorities and the ICB, and also deliver under the Smoke Free Start strand, which will deliver more comms and marketing, advocacy, work around cheap and illicit tobacco, work with trading standards and amplify our opportunities. And finally, also please note that we want to spend around £127,000 on incentives, and this is for our most high prevalence groups. We know that incentives in pregnancy, there's a really strong evidence base around incentives in pregnancy because the cohort that we're working with are our most disadvantaged smokers living on the lowest incomes, which is why it's the most effective. Outcomes increase the numbers going through services and increase the success rates of which people quit. We'll be building the evidence base in this area in terms of high prevalence groups, and we'll be sharing that regionally and nationally. And this is something that other colleagues in South Yorkshire and the Humber are also looking to do. All of this amplifies our opportunities to help the most vulnerable smokers in Sheffield. And we've listed it within the report what those are, but the starkest ones just remind us of people living in the most deprived areas of the city, routine and manual workers, people from black and ethnic minority communities, and people with mental health conditions. Where we've got those high inequalities, these are further amplified when you map over smoking as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So we've got three colleagues who've indicated, so I'll take those three and then come back. So we've got Councillor Sanger, Councillor Smith and Councillor Agenzio. Can I just see if there's anyone else who wants to speak on this item? No? Okay, we'll take those three. Councillor Sanger.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. And I think it's really important to remember that it's about continued work over a number of years, and it's important, as Greg said, smoking is the new smoking. We've got to continue to make progress and continue to hit the targets in terms of the 5-year vision. Clearly, one of the things we've heard in the last week, probably since this report was written, is that the new government's taking up the old government's bill in terms of changes of smoking in public places. I mean, will that make any difference? Are there any additional things you would have written in the report if those announcements had been 2 months ago? And would that change the strategy, or fundamentally, is the idea that the vision is that Sheffield children grow up in a city where smoking is unusual, and that Sheffield is a smoke-free smoke-free city by 2030? That vision is very much in line with both the old government and the new government statements.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. As someone that's seen a family member suffer and die from a smoking-related illness, this has got my full support. My question, possibly at a slight tangent, is around vapes. They have gone from being a way of helping people quitting smoking to becoming a cool and trendy way of taking a hit of nicotine. So is there anything more we could do on the vape front to prevent people vaping becoming smokers? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Agenzio.
Often you steal my thunder, Councillor Smith. My question is also about on vaping, but a slightly different angle. I'm because lots of the packaging for vaping is like very pretty, you know, targeting women in particular or young, you know, younger people. And I was wondering whether there are any plans actually to look at licensing for vaping outlets, because I think you know, this is brilliant, and I know that we already do really well in Sheffield in terms of tobacco, you know, smoking reduction, and it's fantastic. But if we don't nail the vaping and targeting children in particularly young girls, and I've seen young girls vaping in town, and you know, young girls that look like 14, 15 and younger at the bus stop. So if we don't do something about that, how do we then create this smoke-free generation? Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, back to you.
I'll try and do each in turn and link them, Sarah may add. Also, declare conflict of interest. My dad died of smoking. It was horrible. Wouldn't wish that on anybody in the world. Councillor Sanger, on the bill, so I'm on record in lots of places saying this is the most important piece of public health legislation in a generation, probably more important than the original ban on smoking in public places in 2008. Very significant. I fully support the government's intention to lay the bill. Don't know the detail of that bill yet. That will become clear in the forthcoming weeks, I hope, and then we'll see the detail. It may change what we would have written, but until we see the detail, it's impossible to say. It won't change the overall strategy. The overall strategy is stopping folks starting, helping folks stop. That will remain the strategy, whatever, but what's in the bill may change and accelerate some aspects of that, impossible to say. On vapes in particular, building onto Councillor Smith, Councillor Argentio, let's be clear, the business end of harm here remains tobacco. Burns tobacco, that's by far the most harmful thing here. So we mustn't lose sight of that. And vapes as a route out of stopping smoking cigarettes remain really, really important. There are two key things which we hope will be in the bill. I'm pretty clear that one of them will be in the bill, is very aggressive regulation of vaping, colours, how and where they're marketed, basically making vaping boring, so that it probably still appeals to those that want to stop smoking, but appeals significantly less to those who would want to start, and those who, let's be clear, the tobacco industry want to create a market here. So that's the bit that really, really needs to be regulated. The second bit is the age of sale. It will be illegal to sell, not illegal to buy, so we need to be clear about our regulation there. And the third thing, there was pretty strong advocacy for this from lots of the lobby groups, including my own Association of Directors of Public Health, a licensing scheme to sell tobacco and vapes. Now, I don't know whether that will make the bill or won't make the bill, but that will be quite game-shifting if it does, and would strongly support it if it does. But we need to see what that looks like and be able to implement a licensing scheme, but in the same way that we have a licensing scheme for people selling alcohol, lots were advocating that we should have a licensing scheme for those that want to sell tobacco. That increases our ability to enforce the law for those that sell vapes to kids. Because we'll take away your license to sell tobacco would be the ultimate sanction. And that would, again, be quite game-changing, but we don't know whether that's in the bill.
So what I would just add, what I would really welcome to see in the bill is around colleges, universities and the NHS, because that would really support us. Pavement licences would be helpful, but there's bigger fish to fry, if you like, in those spaces. I think the other thing to mention is that there's a huge amount of work at a local level going on with schools around education and vaping, but that won't solve the issue. We need the legislation. And trading standards are doing an awful amount of work within Sheffield, removing illicit tobacco and illicit vapes from our communities. So we've got 70 odd premises that we know about, and we're doing a lot of work there, and we've got two going through the courts at the moment. So just 2 premises, and there's lots of disruption, lots of action, and we'll continue to do that. So we've got 4 trading standards working just on tobacco control and vaping.
Thank you both very much. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for those detailed answers. Sarah, you outlined the recommendations that are ahead of us earlier on. Colleagues, draw your attention to page 113 in the packs. 3 recommendations. Approve the grant of 65,000 to Humber and North Yorkshire Integrated Care Board. Note the Council's attention in becoming a key partner and funder of the South Yorkshire Tobacco Control Alliance, and note the 127,694 being allocated to the incentive scheme colleagues happy to support those recommendations? Brilliant. Thank you both very much indeed. Item 12 on our agenda today is the Street Tree Inquiry Report progress. And we're being joined by James Henderson to present this report. James, if you could just briefly introduce yourself for people who might be watching at home, and then introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm James Henderson. I'm Director of Policy and Democratic Engagement. So this is the second of two planned reports updating the committee on progress against the Council's agreed actions following the publication of Sir Mark Lowcock's independent report on the street tree dispute in 2023. I would like to start by saying that we all acknowledge that the process of change and improvement that is necessary for the lessons from the street tree dispute to be fully learned is a long one. And although this is the final planned report, that doesn't mean that the job is done. Part of what Sir Mark said in his report was the importance of continuous improvement, and in that the criticality of ongoing sustained dialogue with the people and communities of Sheffield to inform the changes that need to be made. The paper that the committee considered and endorsed at your last meeting on community engagement was a key step in putting that approach at the heart of how the council does things. However, that will not by itself be sufficient to meet the ambitions set out in the Council's response to Lowcock, and is why the report before you today explicitly includes a recommendation to further commit to an ongoing dialogue with the people of Sheffield as the organisation continues to improve. In terms of the substance of the report itself, the report is in two main parts. The first, which is section 3, provides an update on the set of actions which are listed in paragraph 2.1, where the first interim report in December 2023 indicated that the committee should have expected to have seen substantial progress by this point. And section 4 of the report details progress towards the remaining areas of activity, most of which have an expected completion date sometime in the future. Overall, progress towards the action plan has been good, and most of the key milestones have been met, including those around improving public engagement and reforming the public questions process. In the areas where objectives have not been fully met, in all cases, progress has been made, and there is a clear timeline to achieving those objectives. Some of the key issues that are set out in the report include the installation of the Town Hall plaque, which is now working to a revised timescale following the establishment of a task and finish group to oversee this action, and that group has met a number of times over the course of the summer and is scheduled to meet again in October. Members of the group have decided to consider suggestions for the wording of the plaque, which is being collated and shared to pull together an agreed statement. And the group are hoping to have their agreed working and to plan the commissioning and consultation of that plaque ready to share with this committee during the winter, so in December or January. In terms of the core investment programme, members will remember that there are a number of streets that were included within the core investment programme, but which did not have work undertaken. A process is in place that has been agreed with the Street Tree Partnership to consult with residents on the designs for those streets, all of which have been completed. But following feedback on the first set of streets that went out to public consultation, work on Silver Hill Road will begin shortly and will be an exemplar of the type of measures that can be put in place. But informed by the experience of that consultation process on the first set of streets, remaining streets have been categorised according to the impact of the proposed designs, and different levels of consultation will take place based on that categorisation. More detail is set out in the report, but that process and the associated work required around it to carefully consult with the people affected means that that work will not have been completed by the original March 2025 deadline. And then finally, the process of providing apologies to those affected by the street tree dispute Work has continued on that since the December 2023 update report. The apology to the courts that was outstanding at that point was completed shortly after that report in January of this year. The only outstanding apologies due are to those who either gave undertakings to the courts or who were subject to injunctions or committal proceedings. Those apologies have been delayed because of the need to resolve outstanding complaints that have been submitted before the inquiry report was published. That process of undertaking that investigation in line with the Council's complaints process has taken longer than we would have liked, but as soon as it has completed, which we anticipate being in the coming weeks, the apologies due to those individuals will be made, and we intend to update the Council's website once all of those apologies have been given to provide public awareness of the fact that this important step has been completed. Section 4 of the report just briefly details progress towards some of the longer-term and council-wide actions, including noting the fact that good progress has been made against most of these, including some that have long time horizons associated with them, such as preparing for the ending of the Streets Ahead contract in 2037. That section also documents how the Council is making progress in other areas, such as its information management practices, employee engagement and councillor standards, and notes the overarching Future Sheffield programme, which aims to transform the Council over the coming months and years and sets out our ambition over the next 4 years to become one of the best performing councils in the country, offering the highest level of service to our residents and communities. The report before you today includes links to further reports and papers, including on Future Sheffield, that detail the substance on each of those areas, most of which have been considered by this committee. So the recommendations are set out, noting the progress since the last update to the committee in December, noting the ongoing work to complete the remaining apologies and to design and install a commemorative plaque, to note the underpinning reports that set out in more detail the key activity alluded to in Sir Mark's report, and to agree that the remaining actions in those areas should be progressed through the relevant service areas and programmes and monitored, and other decisions made by the relevant policy committees. And as I said at the beginning, to agree to commit to an ongoing dialogue with the people of Sheffield as the organisation continues to improve.
Thank you very much, James. That's a really helpful overview of the report, and I'm glad that you concluded on that final recommendation 4, because I think that in many ways is the essence of this report, that whilst this report sets out the actions that have been completed and are underway, there is a recognition here that in order to continue to be on our improvement journey, we must be open to ongoing dialogue with people of Sheffield, hearing different points of view, and always being open to feedback. So I think that's a really important recommendation for us to have in there. I've seen a number of colleagues indicate. I've got Councillor Belbin, Councillor Igenzio, Councillor Otten. At this stage, can I see if there's anyone else who would like to come in on this agenda item? Okay, we'll take those 3. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I think I also wanted to draw attention to that 4th recommendation and really highlight how I think we are taking that approach, certainly in the approach around public engagement, which is talked about in the paper around 3.3, 3.4, etc. I think we have discussed at this committee the statement of intent and things like that, so I won't go over those again, but I just thought it'd be nice to highlight in particular, I think, in that new approach to public questions that we've seen implemented today, that was work undertaken by the Governance Committee, and I feel it's fair to say that the Governance Committee have really taken the Locott report as something that has really quite shaped our agenda over the last year or so, and that piece of work I think was a good example of really involving and listening to people in getting to this new approach to public questions, and we engage with people through workshops, through inviting people along to the committee, people who had asked public questions, people who haven't asked public questions. We did quite a lot of reaching out through that process, and I'm grateful to the officers who supported us with doing that and the members of the public who took part. And again, I'd like to emphasise the piece of work that we are doing now around
community engagement that's referred to in the paper and talks about that co-production approach. Next week we've got our first workshop again with members of Governance Committee, with officers and with representatives of partner organisations who have that experience of engagement with the council, and that's the beginning of a co-production piece of work that's starting to look at what is a huge area around how we engage with communities, how we engage with citizens, and how we engage with organisations. But I'm really, really grateful to the partners who are supporting us with that, and if I can particularly thank colleagues of Voluntary Action Sheffield who have been supporting us to plan that session as well. And I do feel that we're putting into practice that recommendation in a lot of what we're doing, and I hope that we'll continue to see that in our approach.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bellman. Councillor Agencia.
Just a quick question, James. Thank you for the report. I mean, it's really good to see the progress. I was just wondering if, and thank you for clarifying why certain people haven't received an apology. But is there a time scale for that? I know the complaints process needs to take its course, but if the complaints were received before the report was published, the report was published March 23, so it's quite a long time. How much longer do we think it's going to take for those? Because otherwise that's hanging over our head, and we've had people coming repeatedly to ask questions that probably people are still owed an apology. And it would be good to draw a line under it, if possible.
Thank you. Councillor Alton.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, possibly more of a comment than a question. Obviously, I welcome the report. Obviously, it's specifically the issue I want to touch on is the outstanding streets from the core investment period. Is clearly a large part of the Waste and Street Scene work programme. Wrapped up in what I thought, if I can. I don't mean any criticism of officers with any of this, but if I can say a little bit of positive spin in terms of the progress that has been made. There was a bombshell of bad news, wasn't there, that it's not going to be complete by March 2025. Now, the deadline, the March 24 and the March 25 deadlines, the 24 deadline was for the plans to exist, and the 25 deadline is to deliver on them. I have found those very useful, because this authority has struggled to make progress on these streets for many, many years. We did eventually get the first round of the plans written, drawn, by putting extra resource in, because Amy didn't have the capacity to do them as quickly as needed. So they're there, they're ready to be consulted on. The new programme is that we're now consulting on the easiest ones first, so the more difficult ones are going to be coming down the line. They're going to be more difficult to make decisions on, we expect, when the consultations come back. And knowing that we're not now expecting to meet the deadline, I do worry that this is going to go back to where it was before Waste and Street Scene Committee took over, which is it was being allowed to slide because it was so difficult. I know you'll say that Keir Starmer has some difficult decisions coming up, but he needs to he needs to consider the Sheffield Highway Tree challenge. Given our history, we are going to be making more careful decisions about individual highway trees, more considered, more consulted on decisions than probably any other local authority in the world. And given our history, it's right that we do that. But my plea to officers is that even if we're not making the March 25 deadline, please don't let this slide back into it's too difficult, it's not going to happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. And rightly, as Chair of Waste and Street Scene, I hope that you'll be taking full, careful approach to managing this work and keeping a close eye on it, as I know you will. But I'll come back to James and then we'll pick up those points. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. If I take those two points in order. So, Councillor Agencia, regarding the complaints process, it's certainly the case that we are looking to make very rapid progress on that now. As I said in my remarks, we would have wanted this to have concluded before now, but it is important that the complaints process has been followed, and that actually there's been an independent investigation into those complaints, and I know that that process has been done very thoroughly, and so we want to make sure that that completes. We want to make sure that it completes at pace to enable those apologies to be made. So we're certainly looking for that to be done in the autumn, if not before. So in the next weeks, up to a month. So that's what we're looking at there. Councillor Otten, in regard to the core investment period, obviously I'll take that back to the highways team, but I think I can say for certain that there is an absolute intent to make sure that those streets are taken forward, and I know that is being done in consultation and in partnership with the Street Trees Partnership, and working very carefully to make sure that we take on board the views of residents. And I think we've already seen with the streets that have gone out for consultation that those views have been taken on board and changes have been made as a result. So I certainly don't think there is any intent to move more quickly, to move any less quickly than we possibly can.
Thank you. Councillor Perek, I think you just wanted to make one final point on this one.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, James. Just a very quick question. So 4.1.9 talks about future Sheffield's next phase, looking at the Council's approach to contract management and procurement, just to reiterate the benefits of potentially breaking up contracts and looking at insourcing as well as local provision. I think there's an argument that local providers will be more community and Sheffield minded, and I think it's worth taking into scope of that review.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Brett. Just Councillor Johnson, if you can keep it very brief.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, it's just conscious there's quite a number of things that are outstanding, so it's not just the apologies and the plaque. There's quite a few things there, and that's no bad thing. I mean, it's a fair report. I'm just wondering whether we should ask to bring this back just for a final report in another 12 months or so, maybe less than that, so that we don't lose sight of this. Obviously, the fact that some of these things have been quite difficult means that actually probably is incumbent on us to make sure we don't lose sight of them. So probably suggest a roundup report in another 12 months.
Just before I come back to James, this has obviously been subject of discussion at pre-agenda meeting when this particular point was discussed, and I think you were there at that point when we did discuss this. The recommendation 3 sets out that contingent decisions will be made and monitored by the relevant committee. So if I can sort of channel my inner Councillor Otten, I'd suggest that it would be the right place for matters to do with the remaining core investment programme streets to go to waste and street scene. James has already alluded to the fact that I think I heard you say that an update around the plaque would come back to this committee, and it's clearly the case that the governance committee has got ongoing work connected to the ongoing work to improve our engagement with the residents of this city. So I would strongly be in favour of sticking with the recommendation that it is right that committees take ownership of the few remaining outstanding items, and that we all, as senior politicians in this authority, including committee chairs, recognise that the response to the Locott report is a genuinely whole council endeavour, not just the responsibility of SNR. And I'm sure that's not what you intended to suggest, but it's right, I think, that every committee takes this forward as we move as the years pass further from the distance of the publication of the Locott report. So I would be firmly of the view that we stick with that and that the relevant committees monitor that.
Just if I can come back briefly, I mean, I think the whole point about it being a whole council approach, and because it's fundamentally about governance and leadership, when you have that phrase of the failure of strategic leadership, is that it actually is more suited to this committee just to wrap it up. I mean, everyone else has hands with this, but I'm just suggesting we should have the benefits of that.
Thank you. Well, I think there have been appropriate moments over the last couple of weeks, pre-agenda meeting, to suggest points noted, but I think recommendations are set out ahead of us, which I will now turn to. They're on page 157. James has run through them in his presentation, so I won't recap all of that, but will, I think, underscore the importance of recommendation 4, as a number of speakers have done so. Are we all happy to approve those recommendations? Yeah, thank you very much indeed. So, item 13, final agenda item for today, entering into a friendship agreement with the City of Nablus. And we're joined by Nick Hamilton. And thank you very much, Nick, for your patience this afternoon. If you could introduce yourself for people in the room and watching online, and then briefly introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Nick Hamilton, I'm the investment team manager and also the Council's international lead. The paper we have before us basically follows on from a decision that this committee took in February of this year to enter into a friendship agreement with the City of Nablus on the West Bank in the occupied Palestinian territories. The paper basically is seeking an approval of the proposed wording for the friendship agreement, and also in terms of progressing that to the next step in terms of getting the agreement signed. And it also provides an overview in terms of, since the committee's decision in February, the activities that have taken place to get us to where we are now. It's worth saying that the approach from Nablus has been around for quite a long time. We're talking back to April 2019, so that's prior to any of the current conflict. And for a rationale of a series of delays, including a global pandemic, it's taken some time to actually get to this position. Since that time, we actually developed a partner city policy, and the approach was actually assessed against that framework. When Nablus did approach us initially, that wasn't in place. And in all likelihood, we probably would have just entered into an agreement there and then. The proposals here, based on that analysis, obviously sets out the similarities or not with Sheffield, and suggests that we enter into the friendship agreement, which gives us a 12-month period to actually progress that and hopefully develop a deeper understanding of what the opportunities are, and also to take advantage of the existing links that are with the City of Nablus in terms of organisations such as the Sheffield Labour Friends of Palestine, and also PALFest and the University of Sheffield Hallam University. I think that's probably all I need to say.
Thank you very much, Nick, and thank you for setting out the decision-making process to get us to this point. It is an important point that you draw out around the partner city policy, which this committee agreed at the end of last year, and now we are putting that into practice to use it to inform our decision-making process in the way that is set out in the report. So I really welcome that. Thank you for your work to do that and to engage with the municipality of Nablus to get us to this point. Can I see if anyone's got any questions, comments, feedback for Nick on the report? Councillor Johnson and Councillor Naz, in that order, please.
Okay. First of all, Nick, thanks for the work on this. And secondly, as Chair said, this is actually the first time we've put in practice the new approach to request for twin cities. So in line with, I think, what's standard now, we've got this proposal for a friendship agreement for an issue of 12 months, see how it goes. I think it's very welcome. It's a very positive step forward. So very happy to support this, and we'll see how that goes forward. I've got a specific question, as I was approached by some people who just raised concerns about this. The equality impact assessment suggests that there were approaches from certain people in the Orthodox Jewish community raising concerns against a friendship agreement with Nablus. And I just wanted to ask, has anyone from the Orthodox Jewish community in that context actually objected to this or put forward their concerns about this? Or is that perhaps a misreading of the equality impact assessment?
I'll pick that up in a minute. Councillor Naz, thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for the report. I found the report very thoughtful, offering opportunities for developing links and bonds of friendship and solidarity between the citizens of Sheffield and Nablus. I also welcome this report Thank you for that. I also had a question on the equal impact assessment document, similar to what Councillor Douglas has asked. My question was, how have these concerns been explored by the officers? I appreciate it's the qualities team and it's Bashir who's done the impact assessment. But how did they reach their conclusion? Was there any conversation that were had? Just for clarification, I'm not sure how that came to be.
Do I have any other people who want to come in on this agenda item? Councillor Brett.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Nick, for this report. I guess just in addition to what the report says, so on the section where it talks about Palestine being a target market for international student recruitment, I guess something that I think adds to this and adds to the case for twinning. I know the University of Sheffield has a long-standing relationship with the Islamic University of Gaza, where they have a scholarship in place for one student to come over every year. That was started by the Student Palestine Society when I was a member of the Student Palestine Society. I think there's clear demands for local bonds coming from the student body of Sheffield Students' Union, at least, but I think both campuses as well. I think it adds to, even if it's smaller numbers of people coming over, I think there is clear appetite for a two-way link between people in Palestine and people in Sheffield. Something to be encouraged.
Thank you. On the points around the equalities impact assessment, I think my reading of it is that this is any decision to do with the West Bank, to do with Palestine, to do with Gaza, to do with Israel, it does not take place in a vacuum. It takes place in a highly contested political context where the nature of what is happening right now and has been happening for many years means that there will be people who perhaps don't agree with the decision that's taken. And as what I see it here, the references to the communications plan are just to assure anyone who may have concerns around this that those concerns are heard and that the decision is explained about why it's being taken. So I think that's what it's setting out, that there will be people who perhaps don't agree, there will be people who agree. And that applies to, frankly, every decision we've taken today, but certainly every decision that applies to our relationships with places around the world. But we are taking a decision that is one that is measured, one that has been evidenced through the partner city policy, tested against the partner city policy, and the recommendations are put forward in a really thorough way. So we can all, as politicians, stand behind any decision that we take. And if people do approach us with concerns, then we're in an informed position to be able to answer any questions that may come our way.
Sure, just be clear, the questions really, have there been specific concerns expressed against entering into a friendship agreement with Nablus from people identifying as being from the Orthodox Jewish community?
Not that I'm aware.
But I didn't think so, and I just think it's important to just recognise that, because it's understandable. In the guide to the far-right violence we talked about earlier on, it's understandable there will be a certain number of racists who will probably oppose friendship agreements between people in Sheffield and people abroad. But I don't want to be seen as tarring the Orthodox Jewish community in Sheffield with that brush. There has been suggestion that the Orthodox Jewish community must be full of people who are, frankly, racist towards Palestinian people, and I don't think that is the case. And I'm really glad we got to the bottom of that. There has been no complaint on that basis. Thanks. Thanks. It's good news. Thanks
Absolutely.
For clarifying it.
Any suggestion of the kind that you've just outlined, I think we absolutely knock on the head as wrong and not the case. So let the record be very clear that that is not the position of this committee, and any suggestion of the kind that's just been outlined is just not the case, and not one that this council believes at any level, frankly. James, I think you just wanted to come in, is that right?
Yes, thank you. I think just to sort of reiterate that point, really, the equality impact assessment was developed to consider the international strategy as a whole, rather than specifically on this point. And unless Nick knows otherwise, I am not aware and do not believe that any representation of that sort has been received on this.
The other thing just to add, this is about Nablus, it's not about Palestine, and we're responding to a very old response and approach of 5 years ago. So it's not the council's response to the current situation, it's a response to a city in another part of the world reaching out a hand of friendship, and we are now accepting that.
Yeah, okay.
Just
Very briefly.
Perhaps a broader point then is that for all our decision making for equality impact assessments, it's possibly important they focus on the question in hand, not a different question on the same topic. We could always do with tightening up our work on those.
That point is made, but I think, you know, another point that I think is really important that everyone here understands is that, you know, we have a privileged position as politicians conducting our business in public and raising suggestions that things may be interpreted in one way or another is not, I don't find helpful, and I think if taken out of context, you know, could cause tensions to, you know, just all sorts of ramifications could come from that. So I think we just need to be really, really clear in the words that we use in this committee about, you know, reporting things that may have been said. There is an opportunity to raise things privately. We have pre-agenda meetings, we have pre-meetings, reports are shared in advance for this exact reason, so that language can be tested, and if anyone has any concerns about them, then they can be done in the appropriate way. So I think, you know, let's be really, really clear. James has outlined how the equalities impact assessment has been prepared, and, you know, Nick has set out, you know, why the decision is being recommended in the paper going forward. This is a decision about extending a hand of friendship to a city in Nablus in the West Bank, and I look forward, pending this committee's decision, to building on the links that are already there, as set out in the report, and deepening that bond of friendship. This is a positive decision by the council that I hope in a second we will now take and move forward in a positive way. Final point, Councillor Combe, and then really will move to the recommendations.
Thanks very much, Chair. And very briefly, first of all, thanks very much for the report, Nick. Chair, just to say thanks for the explanations you've given about the decision now has been taken. I would really welcome this initiative, and I appreciate the amount of work that's gone on behind the scenes in the context, in the wider context, given that, you know, what we're going through at the moment for the last so many months. It's been very it has had to be very measured, and I really appreciate, you know, the amount of work that's gone on. So I really welcome this initiative, and I hope that this is the first step towards building a greater understanding between the two cities, and, you know, one that can, you know, go further to develop to a more better understanding that benefits both the citizens of Nablus and Sheffield. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Combe. That's a very fitting moment to end this part of the conversation on and turn to the recommendations. So, recommendation 1, to approve the draft wording of a friendship agreement with Nablus, which is appended to the report. 2, to note the further steps to develop the relationship between the cities of Sheffield and Nablus as described in the report. Are people happy to agree those recommendations? Thank you all very much. Thank you indeed. That is the conclusion of our business today. A very varied agenda today. Thank you all for the officers who've presented, and thank you for your participation. Thank you all.